All right, today we're going to talk about security, but maybe not in the way you're thinking. Forget just software and passwords for a second. We're talking about architecture. We're going to design a digital fortress, right? From the ground up, using some really smart, layered principles. So that's the big question, right? How do you actually secure a digital fortress? And look, if your first thought is just build a giant wall around it, well, you might want to rethink that whole strategy. Because here's the thing. Any single wall, no matter how big, can eventually be breached. Real, lasting security, that comes from something way more sophisticated. It's all about intelligent design. Creating different zones and then carefully controlling who and what can move between them. So to really get a handle on how we lay out our fortress, we've got to start with a really foundational concept. It's called domains of trust. Okay, so what does that actually mean? Well, a domain of trust is basically a specific area inside a network where we've established a certain level of, well, trust. It's where the things inside are assumed to be secure. Think of it like this. It's a way of mapping out your digital world to figure out which parts you trust and, just as importantly, how much you trust them. The easiest way to picture this is to think of your whole network as a high-security building. Right? I mean, you wouldn't just give one key to everyone that opens every single door. Of course not. You'd have different security zones, like the public lobby, then the office floor that needs a key card, and then, way in the back, the super high security vault. Each one of those areas, that's a domain of trust. All right, so we've got these zones, but what actually makes them work? What gives them their security? It all comes down to defining really clear trust boundaries. So the actual walls of our building, so to speak, are these trust boundaries. These are the exact points where the level of trust changes from one zone to another. And to enforce those boundaries, you need a couple of things. You need security policies. Those are the rules for each specific zone. And you need access controls, things like firewalls, which act like the digital keycard readers that decide who gets to go from one domain to the next. Okay, this all sounds pretty good in theory. But what does it actually look like in a real live network? Let's take these ideas and put them into action with some real-world examples. So here's a great way to see the contrast. On one hand, you've got your internal network. This is your high-trust zone, the inner sanctum. But on the other hand, you have something called a DMZ, or a demilitarized zone. This is a semi-trusted area, kind of an intermediary zone. Let's break down what each of these are. So first, the internal network. This is the heart of your fortress, right? It's where your employees are, where your most important internal servers live. We call it the highest trust zone because you're assuming everything and everyone inside is under your secure control and following the rules. This is your vault, your command center. Then you've got the DMZ, the demilitarized zone. Now this is a really cool concept. Think of it as a buffer zone. It's like a secure lobby that sits between your super safe internal network and the wild, unpredictable internet. It's the perfect place to put things that need to face the public, like a web server, without letting them connect directly to your most critical systems. And these zones aren't just for stuff inside your own organization. Let's say you're collaborating with another company. Well, you can create what's called a partner network. It's its own separate domain of trust with its own specific rules, so you can exchange data securely without, just handing over the keys to your entire fortress. Okay, so we have these different zones, these domains of trust. But how are they actually organized, like physically, within the network structure? Well, that brings us to the 3 layers of defense. See, this whole concept of trust isn't just some abstract idea we float around. It's actually built right into the physical design of the network, in a 3-layer architecture. It all starts at the bottom, with the access layer. This is exactly what it sounds like. It's the entry point. It's where users and all their devices, laptops, phones, printers, actually connect to the network. In our building analogy, this is all the doors and windows. Okay, moving up a level, we have the distribution layer. This layer is kind of like the traffic manager. It takes all that data coming from the access layer and intelligently routes it between the different zones, enforcing all those security policies we talked about. This is like the hallways, the stairwells, and the elevators of our building. And then, at the very heart of it all, you have the core. This is the super high-speed backbone of the entire network. Its only job is speed. It's not supposed to be thinking about policies. It's just meant to move huge amounts of data from point A to point B as fast as humanly possible.
It's the steel frame, the foundation of our entire building. So the big question is, how do you secure the connections between these different layers? Well, that's where something called a choke point comes in. These are super strategic locations, think firewalls or gateways, that you place between the layers. They act as mandatory security checkpoints. All traffic has to pass through them, letting you inspect and control everything. This is how you really enforce those trust boundaries we set up.
All right, so we've covered the big ideas, the security zones and the physical architecture. But how do you actually, build it? How do you put it all together? Let's wrap this all up with a simple 10-step security blueprint. Here it is, the playbook, and we've broken it down into 5 key phases. First, you analyze. You got to know what you're working with, right? You can't build a fortress without surveying the land. Next, you design. This is where you actually draw up the blueprints. But, and this is crucial, before you start building for real, you test and revise. You build a small-scale version in a lab to find any flaws. Then, you implement, and you do it carefully, maybe one critical area at a time. And finally, you validate, making sure the thing you built actually does what you designed it to do.
And that really brings us to the main takeaway here. Real, solid security isn't just a product you can buy off a shelf. It's a system you have to design with real intention. So I'll just leave you with this question to think about. If your own digital life were building, how well designed are your security zones?
Thanks for tuning in, stay curious, and we'll catch you on the next one.